Well, thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to this tonight. I am someone who's also very fond of quoting people, Madam Speaker. Now, I don't have any quotes of the House Leader, but I do have one from the Minister of Economic Development and Job Creation, who once held the title of Finance Minister and was responsible for introducing budgets. And in his first budget, he said, and I quote, "Restoring trust, accountability, and transparency is foundational to our plans to build a fiscally sustainable government and protect the critical services we all cherish." Now, Madam Speaker, as it turns out, that was very prescient, because this government hasn't built a fiscally sustainable Ontario, and they have not protected critical services for Ontarians. And so it's not entirely shocking to understand that they haven't restored trust and accountability, because, as evidenced by their move today, they are not particularly open and transparent. You know, Madam Speaker, the government says with their budget, which they're trying to fast-track this afternoon, that they're protecting Ontario, and that they're doing but unfortunately, Madam Speaker, they're doing everything they can to avoid any kind of scrutiny. They're rushing the budget through. They're skipping committee. They're cutting off debate. That isn't particularly transparent. And, you know, the Premier campaigned on being transparent and being for the people, but he doesn't actually want to hear from the people, and he doesn't want to hear from the people elected to this place. He said he was going to be different. Well, I guess he is, Madam Speaker, because I don't know too many governments who have multi-hundreds of billions of dollar budgets that they don't actually consult people on, that they don't actually hear debate on, that they don't actually hear expert testimony on, Madam Speaker. And so I guess in that sense, the Premier is quite different. The government says that time is of the essence. Well, they had time earlier this year to give 4 weeks up for an election and another, 6 or 7 weeks for transition, but they don't have 4 days to do public hearings. They don't even have 1 day to do public hearings. They're giving us 40 minutes to debate the budget, Madam Speaker. If the budget was so great, the government shouldn't really be afraid to have everyone talk about it. They shouldn't be afraid to go to committee and hear what residents of Ontario might have to think. But I think they are, because if they did go to committee and if they did hear from residents of Ontario, I think this is what people of Ontario might say. I think people in Ontario might say that there is a healthcare crisis, that wait times are up, that ERs are overflowing, and that despite the Premier's promise to end hallway healthcare, it's only gotten worse. And then they would ask, what is in this budget to fix those things? And the answer, unfortunately, from the government would have to be not a lot. The budget still doesn't properly fund public hospitals. Instead, they are funneling money to private clinics. And, Madam Speaker, I think we can agree that that's not solving the crisis, that's cashing in on it. And that, unfortunately, is something this government likes to do. And if we were to go to committee and we were to hear from people and we were to talk about the next biggest item in the budget, which is education, I think we might hear from people the same story. School boards are still warning about cuts. I was in a meeting not 90 minutes ago about cuts to education, cuts in the classroom, cuts to special needs, cuts to the infrastructure necessary to build schools. The government is perfectly okay with kids learning in temporary classrooms and portables instead of actually building the schools we need for a growing population. I think if they went to committee, they might hear that from experts and they might hear that from regular Ontarians who might come to participate. And they would certainly hear that from the representatives of those residents of Ontario if they gave us that chance to debate it, Madam Speaker. But of course, they're trying to limit debate on their budget. So, Madam Speaker, how do you build a strong, skilled workforce for the 21st century economy when their government is starving the institutions that will train the next generation? I think they might hear that if they continued with the debate on the budget, Madam Speaker, and went to committee. But I guess we'll never know the answer because they're cutting off debate. Madam Speaker, another important issue that the government claims that they're working on, and I think we would hear from people about, is housing. And again, the government talks a big game about housing. But when you look at the numbers that are in the budget, you see the same pattern. The government wants to build homes. Great, so do I. But they want to build homes without schools, and they want to build homes without roads, and they want to build homes without transit. Madam Speaker, you can't just pour concrete and call it a community. If you build the homes without the basics, you're not fixing a crisis, you're baking in the failure. And I think if they went to committee, they would hear that from people. I think they would hear that from the same home builders that contribute to their fundraisers, Madam Speaker. That's what I hear from the that's what I hear from the home builders who I talk to. They want to participate in building stronger communities. They really do. They really do, because that helps them sell better homes, helps everyone make more money, helps everyone live in a better community. But the government's not particularly interested in hearing about that, and evidenced by the fact that they're cutting off debate. Now, Madam Speaker, we've heard a lot about how the Premier is afraid of Donald Trump and what Donald Trump might do to Ontario's economy. He's quite worried. He's quite worried about it. He's quite worried about it. It's a sense of fear that the Premier has. And so you think if someone was so afraid of the consequences of Donald Trump, there might be things in the budget to help defend against those things. I think if we went to committee and heard from experts, we might hear that the whole rationale for the election and the content of the budget really doesn't have a lot to defend Ontario against Mr. Trump, and the Premier doesn't really have anything that will assuage his fears or the fears of Ontarians in his budget. So, Madam Speaker, budgets are about priorities. It's about who gets help and who gets left behind, about what kind of province we want to build and who gets a real shot at the future. I think going to committee would have given us an opportunity to hear from some of those people, the people who are being left behind, and how this government continues to keep them behind. I think the government would hear that the budget is a failure. I think that they would hear that families are hurting, that businesses, large and small, are stretched, and communities are waiting for help. And I think the government would hear that many people feel that they're more focused on headlines than on helping people. And I think that's one of the reasons why they want to expedite things, Madam Speaker, because they are afraid of hearing those things. They are afraid of giving people a microphone to say those things. They are afraid of exposing those people to the media here at Queen's Park and giving them an opportunity to end up on television and in the newspaper. Otherwise, they would allow debate to continue. And finally, Madam Speaker, I think they are afraid that they would continue to hear that Liberals are still the only party proposing tax cuts. We are the only party proposing affordability relief for families, because in their budget, they've proposed no income tax for the middle class. They haven't proposed taking HST off of the essentials of heating your home in the winter and cooling it again in the summer. They have not proposed tax cuts, to help small businesses, while Liberals have done all those things and more, Madam Speaker. And I think if they allowed debate to continue and they allowed there to be committee hearings, they would hear a little bit about that. So, Madam Speaker, obviously, shutting off debate disallows the elected representatives of our province the opportunity to raise these important issues, to bring these important issues forward, and it really shuts down the opportunity for people in Ontario to be heard, which I would think was the whole point of having an election in the first place, because the government wanted to hear from people. But now they're quite comfortable shutting everything down and going home on summer vacation, and who knows when we'll be back. And thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I'll now give other people an opportunity to say a few words.
For the debate, I recognize the member from